So week one decided to start off with a bang with the backyard brawl game. And my expectations for this game were confusing. I really did think that West Virginia was going to win this football game. I would talk very negatively on the outlook for Pitt this season. I'm still not high on Pitt, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, but wow, did they manage to finish that game strong. I thought eventually West Virginia was going to pull away the way that they were playing, the way that they had positioned themselves at the end of this game. They were leading at the right time. They were trending in the right direction to win that game. I don't know how much of that I'm willing to blame on, or not blame, like that's Pitt didn't do anything to score that on that pick six. Bryce Ford Wheaton made a mistake. The dude dropped the ball. The ball hit him right in the hands after he had an amazing game. He finished with 9 receptions for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's on my radar now as a draft prospect based on the way that he played. A fantastic possession receiver. And JT Daniels kept going to him. But that one freaking play is what decided the football game. That mistake is what decided the football game. So, like, I'm sitting here, I'm trying to collect my thoughts on where I stand with this. I don't feel like it makes sense to give Pitt credit for this game. It doesn't make any sense to say that Pitt deserves to be and show that they're the 17th ranked team in the country. West Virginia's better than we believed that they were. They looked a lot stronger and more competent than many expected that they would in this game. But I don't think Pitt is as good as the score indicates here. That, they won a close game. They fought really hard. I give them credit for that. But this is going to be a long season for Pitt. If that is the result of the game for the 17th ranked team in the country, that it was that close of a game for them to beat an unranked opponent. Again, I can't really pinpoint if West Virginia is that good and Pitt is that much better, and maybe we should be considering West Virginia towards the end of the season as like a top 25 team, like from 20 to 25. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Pitt, though, the one thing I have to say is I don't know if I'm willing to buy into Keaton Slovis. Both of these guys, and I tweeted it out, we have a battle between the two mediocre former USC quarterbacks, and they both played like it. They both played the way that we're used to watching them play, just a sloppy quarterback play. Both of them have the pocket awareness of a cave bat. Both of them have no idea to sense pressure. A lot of forced throws, a lot of questionable decisions that were made by the both of these guys. But I think my main takeaway ultimately is that I'm not high on Pitt after this one. I know that they won the freaking football game. I get it that they won the football game, but I'm not high on Pitt. I am higher on West Virginia and how they played. And had it not been for one mistake, they probably would have won the game. And they almost came back. If that ball at the very, in the final seconds on that 4th down heave by JT Daniels was caught at the 1 yard line, we would have been talking and we'd probably be watching a game in overtime right now. The game that we still have going on, though, we've got Penn State Purdue that's still playing out. Purdue just had that crazy pick six. They're back on offense. But Penn State's receivers have looked terrible in this game. Penn State, I think it's Parker Washington's the one good receiver that they have. Yeah, it's Parker Washington. He's the one good guy that they have. But the rest of these guys, I'm watching them, balls hit them in the hands, just completely fat fisting balls, like just that is the worst thing I could have said. Ignore that. I might clip that and post that separately. They're like fat handing these throws that were sent to them, completely messing up on plays. There were so many drop balls earlier in the game that cost them a lot of drives. All of the production in this game has come from Sean Clifford who has scored a number of their rushing touchdowns and has had some rushing production in this game. They've got a couple of young running backs that are playing really well. And they had that long touchdown, which was their tight end Strange at the end of the half. Again, that's a tight end making that play. The receiver situation for Penn State is going to screw them because, and I said this coming into this weekend, Purdue is not that good. Like, I'm not high on Aiden O'Connell. I think that he's played decently in this game. I don't think he really has the touch to complete passes consistently the way that you need a high level, and as some people have considered him to be an NFL draft prospect quality quarterback, but he gets the job done. He's a good quality starting Big Ten quarterback. A lot more what's going to come into this victory for Purdue is the mistakes made by the Penn State receivers. Like, that's where the credit is ultimately going to go. I can't believe that Penn State's going to blow this. This is tricky for me because I despise Purdue. I don't like Purdue. I don't think they're as good as they've been hyped up to be, but I bet on Purdue, which was kind of stupid, considering my disdain for them as a football program. This weekend, though, I got to say, though, we started off really, really strong. We started off with that crazy game with the backyard brawl game. We have this game right now that is a three-point game between Purdue and Penn State. This has been an up and down game. It's been hard to try and watch and pick between the two games and decide where I'm focusing my attention tonight. And then we had a battle between Central Michigan and Oklahoma State, where I believe the final score was 58-44, which is astronomically high scoring for the first game in the season. But I have to say, if you're an Oklahoma State fan, you got to be worried. Central Michigan is not that good of a football program. Central Michigan is not that good to be putting up 44 points on your defense. And I know that they were a bad defensive team last year, and they were a struggling defensive team, especially in that Fiesta Bowl game. But to give up 44 points after losing your defensive coordinator to Central Michigan is highly concerning for Oklahoma State. I guess the way that you have to really bank on success this season is Spencer Sanders putting up all of your production. Like, that is that what you're going to rely on as an Oklahoma State fan? And I don't think that is something that you can consistently rely on, is Spencer Sanders putting up 6 touchdowns. When they have to play good football programs, when they have to actually play their Big 12 schedule, Spencer Sanders is not going to throw for 6 touchdowns like he did. Like, this is he threw for 4 touchdowns, 400 yards, though, is what his final total was. It's a weird way to start week 1 because we've got these ranked teams not losing, but at the same time, they're playing like shit in games that they're supposed to dominate. So like I was talking about earlier with Pitt, that's the same circumstance with Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State didn't really lose a lot of players. The bigger issue is them losing their defensive coordinator who helped them in important matchups last season. But to give up 44 points and have to score 58 to beat a MAC team, that's not the 12th ranked team in the country. They're going to be in for a hurting when they play Texas. They're going to be in for a hurting when they play Oklahoma. When they play West Virginia, they are going to be in for a hurting. The rankings so far have been arbitrary. And the thing that pisses me off so much is that we have all these people who get pissed off that Notre Dame is ranked as high as they are. And we've got Oklahoma State, who's giving up 44 points to Central Michigan. Again, I'm going to reiterate my point. Central Michigan is not a good football team. They are not that good of a football program to put up 44 points against a Big 12 team. That's extremely problematic. The rest of these games that we had so far this weekend, I mean, there's not really anything too telling. Northern Illinois wins 34-27. Wake Forest 44-10 over VMI. Tennessee rolls Ball State, but what were we really expecting there? Hendon Hooker looked fantastic. Joe Milton even got into the football game. The big thing that remains here that we're going to be talking about is what the hell do we make of Pitt? And there were a lot of shining, moments. Like their receivers, Pitt's receivers looked really good. Pitt has the receiving group to be as productive as they were last year, which is saying something. They had Jordan Addison, who is no longer there. And I'm curious to see the stat line from these Pitt receivers. You had a handful of guys go over 50 yards. You had pretty strong production from those Pitt receivers. A lot of big bodies, which is weird watching those guys. I don't know if I'm willing to necessarily buy into Keaton Slovis as the guy. And then not to mention the fact that you're starting over with a new offensive coordinator now that Mark Whipple is with Nebraska. The whole entire game, I saw from Slovis, who at one point before the start of last season was considered to be an NFL draft prospect. At one point, we were considering him to be, a good quality player. And all I saw, a guy who was relatively timid, but the way that he was reacting under pressure was problematic. The play calling didn't help him, and the positioning that he was placed in often did not help him. But Keaton Slovis, despite having more physical talent than Kenny Pickett, is not going to produce the same results. So we already got a comment from Jack Mills thrown in here. This game was quite concerning for Pitt's defense. I definitely agree. So that's where I'm worried if Slovis can get the job done is the first thing. But at the same time, to allow that many points, to have to rely on your defense to score points to win you that football game against JT Daniels, who looked like shit. He looked terrible in that game. Equally as inconsistent and questionable as Slovis did throughout that game. 214 yards, 23 for 39 on passing, 2 touchdowns. I'm not gonna knock him and give him the interception. That was not his fault. But I'm very distracted because Colin's already commented. Colin, I'm really happy that you're here. I've been waiting for you to participate on these live streams. Were you expecting Slovis to be good as Pickett? Colin, I was not expecting Keaton Slovis to be good as Kenny Pickett, but I had high hopes for Keaton Slovis to be productive and to not have the awareness of a cave bat in the pocket. The guy was flustered every time that there was an instance of any pressure. It's problematic. There has been, be better. Work has been a bitch. Be better, Colin. But to your point, though, Slovis was a higher rated recruit. And if you lined up Keaton Slovis when he was at USC before the start of the 2021 season and Kenny Pickett before the start of the 2021 season, any draft analyst, especially, my boy Ryan Roberts, I know, Colin, you like to laugh at the fact that I always go for him for my input. If you put them together, any draft analyst was going to say that Keaton Slovis was the better draft prospect. He's got the better tools. His ability to apply those tools is clearly not the same. I kind of wonder if Mark Whipple was still there and there wasn't this battle between Pat Narduzzi and Mark Whipple that forced him out, if Slovis would have played better, if he was in a system that would have set him up better. I think the results would have been vastly different if Jordan Addison was there and Mark Whipple were still there, because that's ultimately what helped Kenny Pickett. I don't think Kenny Pickett's that good, Colin, to fully answer your question. What else did you say here? Gross. Why expecting anything from a former USC quarterback from the past decade? Well, I don't know if former is the right phrasing, but Caleb Williams is going to be really good this year. We can't be knocking on any of these, going forward USC quarterbacks. Malachi Wilson is supposed to be really good, and he's committed to the USC program. I mean, we can't act like USC hasn't had a lot of 5-star recruits to come through that program. But I mean, regardless, though, Pitt though is just I don't think they're the 17th ranked team in the country. I don't see it. Colin's the only one participating. We've got a decent amount of viewers we got 6 people that are hopped in right now. Drop any comments, thoughts on the backyard brawl game. Any thoughts on this Pitt Penn State game, which is Penn State just punted again while I was talking and bashing Keaton Slovis. This is just impossible to watch, this Penn State offense. Colin, you said that Slovis may have been a high-touted recruit, but that USC staff was known to blow the development of quarterbacks. Yeah, and I was even thinking this, like in the beginning of the game, Slovis actually looked kind of good, and I was willing to give Slovis some credit and start talking him up. But then he was getting sacked. He was making mistakes on third down. He was freezing up when pressure was coming to him. But the thing that I was thinking is exactly that point, is that he has been done such an ill service by Clay Helton and that entire USC coaching staff. Him and JT Daniels both were completely screwed over in their development. Like it's so problematic to think of both of these USC guys and what they could have been as players. Like we saw flashes of it from both of these guys. Like JT was dropping some of these throws in tight situations on the sideline with, really good velocity, really good placement. That 5-star quarterback was starting to shine through. But then you start to see the lack of processing ability, the lack of decision making, the lack of understanding of what's in front of him. All of those things were showing up. I still have to say, though, that Daniels versus Slovis, I think Daniels was the better quarterback in this game. I know that if you look at the box score, you see the interception and you immediately go, oh, JT Daniels threw a pick and the completion percentage was not that great. The throws that JT Daniels is making and setting himself up and setting that offense up was a lot better than what Keaton Slovis was doing. A lot of those scoring drives for Pitt, one, you have to take into account for the pick six that came off that interception that changed the course of this game. The other thing that comes into the equation, though, is the amount of long receptions with yak attached to it that set up Pitt for really easy scoring plays. Like I'm thinking of that one throw that he had to his tight end where he broke a couple tackles and then he got the ball down into the 10-yard line, down to the 10-yard line, roughly around that range, and then they just punched it in. There were a bunch of plays like that for this Pitt offense. I don't give Slovis credit for those throws. That didn't take anything for him to set himself up for those throws. So I still stand by the point that I think JT was the better player in this game. He just got screwed. He got completely screwed by his receiver making a mistake, a guy that was so freaking good throughout the entirety of this game and made one mistake. One freaking mistake. Bryce Ford Wheaton looked so goddamn good, and I was so juiced up, and that mistake really killed the performance that he had. Wait, I didn't react to this. So Colin, you said even Sam Darnold. Yeah. Okay, Darnold's a different category because like Darnold wasn't good in the first place, and he wasn't properly developed at USC, and then he steps into a situation where he's not properly developed with the New York Jets. So like the guy's been screwed every step of the way, and he shows up in Carolina multiple years into his career, not properly developed. Like how much of that are you really going to blame on the guy? But that's the epitome of screwed over, effed up USC quarterbacks. The one thing I want to talk about, we've had in this game that's going on right now, I've got the Penn State Purdue game, and in the Pitt West Virginia game, these goddamn targeting plays. These freaking targeting calls that are vastly disrupting and messing up the flow of these games. The problem that we now sit with is that they've made such an effort to change targeting rules to the point where they're going to call any level of an ounce of contact, and if they deem by the letter of the law that it is targeting, you're getting ejected from the game. The problem that we have now with that this rule has been instituted is that there is no going back. There is no backtracking to say we need to ease up on the way that we are approaching targeting, because ultimately targeting leads to concussions, which leads to CTE, which leads to long-term health problems, which leads to lawsuits. So if you backtrack and a player is concussed on a call that could have been considered targeting, it is going to open the floor for litigation. That is now where we sit. And that is the NCAA is going to have tons of lawyers in their ear preventing them from making any adjustment. What they are going to be saying to them is, don't make any changes. We've already made the change. There's nothing we can do. The thing that pisses me off the most with these targeting calls, and when they go through, even if it's, it's arbitrary, it's not 100% for sure, they are massive momentum shifters for any offense. They aggressively shift the momentum for a team that maybe is struggling to get things going. And it happened in the goddamn Pitt game. It happened in this goddamn Purdue Penn State game, that an offense that was struggling to move the ball gets this momentum because a player's ejected, the crowd gets into it, and then on top of that, you get a boost of 15 yards. It is killing natural momentum in games. It is providing an unnatural boost for something that shouldn't be happening. Colin, what did you say here? Targeting should be dropped. Go back to gladiator style, CTE causing entertaining it. Okay, I know what you're trying to do here, Colin. I get the bit. It's a good bit. But no, we're not going to go backwards. We can't go backwards. I'm glad you agree with me on the momentum shift in the penalties, because like it's less of just the general issue here with targeting is that you're obviously you're leading to ejections, you're leading to penalties, but there is a noticeable shift in momentum that occurs once these plays happen. And I implore anyone who's watching this live or on the replay, to the next time you see a targeting play, remember I said that. Pay attention to what happens on that drive and the following drives. It usually provides a spark, even for an offense that's already moving. It provides a spark for things to progress and move more even further for an offense that might be struggling, moving successfully, whatever. But the problem is we can't sit here and say that something needs to be fixed, because there is nothing to be fixed. Nothing can be fixed. We've already made the decision, and there's no going back. Yeah, Colin, I know that it is a one-sided conversation. I'm glad that you're here. I miss us doing this exchange. I miss you and I having our little, late night talks on Thursdays and Fridays, or whatever days we were doing the streams and such. But I'm glad that you're back. I'm going to go until this Penn State Purdue game ends, but it is problematic that Purdue is up right now by 3 points. That interception that Sean Clifford had was bad. That was really, really bad. I was kind of wondering, they put Drew Alar in the game, and he made some nice throws. Like, the dude's got some juice on his arm. Oh, they're going to call that for pass interference? Nope, no pass interference. Okay, so we got a 4th down play. We've got time for Penn State to get the ball back. Drew Alar had some juice on his arm. The backup quarterback, the highly touted recruit for Penn State, has some juice. And watching what Clifford has done in this game, coupled with the issues at receiver for Penn State, part of me really wonders if maybe they at some point need to switch to Alar. If they lose this game, I give it a couple games before they make that pivot. We know what Sean Clifford is. Sean Clifford has hit his ceiling, and he has hit his ceiling for a very, very long time now. He is not a player that is going to improve, and we're already seeing that. He is physically very, very limited as a quarterback. There's only so much that he is going to be able to do. And when his receivers are dropping balls the way that they are, and the ball is hitting the ground as much as it is, and the run game's not really progressing and moving as much as it could be doing, you're going to need to get some sort of a spark in the offense. And Alar is very obviously not far along enough in his development because he's a true freshman to lead this team to anything meaningful. But if you're losing football games and you're losing to Purdue, who I think is a bad football program, a mediocre Big Ten football program, you should throw Alar in. Drew Alar should be starting. Is it Alar? Is it Alar? I keep wondering what the correct pronunciation is here. And as I'm shitting on Sean Clifford, he is slowly starting to put together a drive here with the 2-minute drill. I'm just so out on Clifford. I'm absolutely shocked that Clifford is returning. Yeah, he's definitely my QB1 in the class. The thing that I scoffed at so much is that, every year when we have this outsider quarterback that rises, or something weird with the draft class that happens, particularly with the quarterback position, everyone always does this bit where it's like, who's the new guy of who's the such and such guy of this class? So when Joe Burrow came out, who's the Joe Burrow of this class? Who's going to be the random riser first overall pick? And the question that's been brought up is, who is the Kenny Pickett of this class? And Sean Clifford has been brought up in the discussion as the Kenny Pickett potentially of the class, new offensive coordinator, sixth-year player, has been there forever, has been a part of the program forever, and suddenly could just, catch lightning in a bottle. They are running the ball in a 2-minute drill. Holy shit. That is, oh my God. That is one of the most disturbing thing. It's a 2-minute drill. Do you really not trust your receivers in your offense that much that you can't throw the ball? And it's just all these quick hit little throws. I mean, oh wow, that's a big yak play that they just had. Even if they manage to score in this drive and win this game, Penn State is in for a rude awakening towards the end of the season. Ryan has no idea the correct pronunciation for Drew Alar. To go back to your point, though, Sean Clifford, QB1 of this class, no, that is absolutely definitely not true. I just want to see what happens in this game, and I'm going to end this stream. I'm so bought in to what happens here. It's all dump offs. It's all quick throws to the sideline. Like that was just a quick flare route. This Penn State offense is so uninspired. There is nothing exciting about this Penn State offense, it's weird because they have Parker Washington, who is a really talented player, really talented receiver, good enough to be drafted in the first round. And the running back that they have, I think it's Nick Singleton, who's the freshman that they have, who has had comparisons to Saquon Barkley, is supposed to be good. And he only has 31 yards rushing on 10 carries because they're so reliant on throwing the ball. Oh, they just scored. Kevon Lee just scored. Okay. So now Penn State takes the lead. There's 37 seconds left. My bet is done, which I'm not that upset about. I don't trust Aiden O'Connell at the end of this game. So ultimately, let's speak in hypotheticals here. If Penn State wins this football game here, there's 37 seconds remaining. If Penn State wins, I am still very wary of what they're capable of doing. If they show up against Michigan, who has a really good defense, and they perform this way offensively, if they're dropping this many passes, if they're rushing for 3.1 yards per attempt, they are going to be in a very, very difficult spot. I'll ask Sean, the betting master, instead. I went 3 for 1 on my picks last week. He also took Purdue, by the way, so you can't go to Sean. I also asked Sean to come on this live stream, and he'd rather sit and drink with his buddies and bet on the game and watch the game. But here we are sweating it out in the heat, and it's 80 degrees in my apartment right now. I'm sweating my balls off, if anybody can't tell, watching this game. This is really sweating it out. It looks like Penn State's going to win. And I said this from the jump. I said this on my preview show earlier in the week. I don't think Purdue's as good as everyone was making it out to be. You lose George Karlaftis. You lose David Bell. Aiden O'Connell's fine. Aiden O'Connell's mediocre. He's mid. He gets the job done. They're going to be a 7-win football team. That's the most realistic outlook for this Purdue team. I don't think they have it in them to march down the field with 37 seconds left. Anyone else other than Colin have any thoughts on this game, on this Purdue Penn State game? Is it 37 or 57? My eyesight is terrible. That is a 5, I think. It is 57 seconds remaining. Yes, it is 57 seconds. Still a little more than I thought it was going to be. We got a comment from Colin. Will you or Ryan be more annoying if... Colin, I'm telling you right now, if Notre Dame wins, I am coming on here to do a live stream. And I am going to shout into this microphone for an hour, calling for the heads of everyone who picked against Notre Dame, who has talked about Notre Dame being overrated. I said this when I did my preview show on Tuesday, that Notre Dame is not getting the credit it deserves. Wow, that was a really... See, like, this is my problem with Aiden O'Connell. Anyone who's watching this game, that play throwing into what looks like double coverage, very questionable decision. I don't understand the Aiden O'Connell hype. It's beyond me. I don't understand it. But to get back to the Notre Dame point, everyone has doubted Notre Dame coming into this season. People forget and don't want to acknowledge the talent that's on that roster. Isaiah Foskey, Michael Mack, Cam Hart, just to name the key players on that team. Audric Estime is a fantastic running back. The receivers are where we're worried, but that offensive line that Notre Dame has is developed since last year, since its early season struggles. We saw it improve drastically throughout the season to a point where they were only a 1-loss team at the end of the season and good enough to play in a New Year's Six Bowl. They should have won that game. That's a separate issue. But Notre Dame is a lot better than people are willing to give them credit for. It's bugging the crap out of me who the name of the Ohio State defensive coordinator is, who was previously at Oklahoma State. Jim Knowles. So the one other point that I have here with this Notre Dame game is that if we remember the Fiesta Bowl, which I was there sitting in the stands watching that game. Jim Knowles was the defensive coordinator for Oklahoma State. They now face Jim Knowles. Is that the right? It's going to bug the crap out of me if I'm actually not. Yeah, no, it is Jim Knowles. Okay, just had to double check. I make mistakes. I want to make sure I'm making the right statement here. Jim Knowles gave up a ton of yards, a ton of pass production to Jack freaking Cohn. Tyler Buchner didn't come in during that game. Tyler Buchner didn't play really in that game the way that we saw him when Brian Kelly was leading the team. Marcus Freeman said, I'm going to roll with Cohn as much as possible. We're not going to swap in Tyler Buchner. And Cohn threw for some stupid total. I think it was like 400-something yards. It was like one of the best passing performances for a Notre Dame quarterback. He completely lit up an Oklahoma State defense that was supposed to be really good. That was what all was talked about going into that game, is that they were really freaking good. And Jack Cohn throwing to what was considered to be a bad receiving group for Notre Dame, torched that defense. The mistakes that cost them that game was defensive, and you do have to put some blame on Marcus Freeman for that. But I am confident that Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees are going to be prepared to match up with an Ohio State defense that was bad last year, now led by the same defensive coordinator that they gashed last year. They're going to come prepared. The one thing that is going to be the determining factor is, how does Al Golden and Marcus Freeman, if he has any decision-making on the defensive side of things, which I'm sure he does, prepare. Wow, they just picked up a 4th down. There's not enough time here. How does he prepare to face against CJ Stroud, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, that entire talented offense? That is where things are going to get difficult, and that's where things are going to get sticky. I think it's going to be a shootout. People assume that Ohio State's going to win by 3 scores, and I think that's an absolute joke. The talent for that OK State defense isn't anything like the Stop. Colin. That Ohio State defense was, again, it was terrible last year. It was really bad. The Rose Bowl is really good proof. They didn't just suddenly get better overnight. They didn't just rapidly get better overnight. And if there was development, it was by a guy who didn't properly prepare Oklahoma State's defense against Notre Dame last year. I got no faith in Jim Knowles. I think that this is a perfect situation. If any situation needed to be written up properly for Notre Dame to come in and upset Ohio State, this is the perfect situation. This is the situation for it to happen in. But to answer your original question, yes, I will be incredibly insufferable. We've got 7 seconds left here in the Purdue Penn State game. It is 35-31. Is it 7 seconds left? Colin, can you give me a time check? My eyesight, as those who can't tell, is horrendously terrible, and my TV is across the room. I think it's 7 seconds left. The weird thing is, like, this was a competitive game. This was, can Knowles learn from Day? I don't know how much of like an impact Day isn't known for defense either. Exactly. My point is that, like, what Ryan Day is an offensive coach. Like, I don't know what Ryan Day is going to bring to the table. He hired Jim Knowles because last year the guy that they had wasn't getting the job done. Like, that was why. Colin, what are you doing right now that you're not watching this Purdue Penn State game? This is a fantastic game that we've got going on right now. The weird thing I will say, though, with this game is, like, this is a really competitive game. This is a fun game to watch because it's close. Not from like a technical good football standpoint. Oh, man. Wow. That is a pathetic way to lose, is off of a sack. The final play of the game, Aiden O'Connell is sacked. That ends the game for Purdue. This game is going to mean nothing for the final standings of the Big Ten. It was fun to watch, and it's good that Penn State got the victory, and I would love to see more of Drew Allar, but this absolutely means nothing for the final standings of the Big Ten. It's going to come down to Michigan and Ohio State. I think it's going to have to wrap us up on, folks. Anyone who hopped in, appreciate you. Feel free to come back at any time. I don't know if Friday, probably not going to go live because the games suck. The games are terrible. Saturday, I'm going to try to. Just depends where I'm at. If not, maybe I'll go live or do some type of a reaction on Sunday morning. But those who hopped in, appreciate you taking the time to chill with us. We'll be doing more live streams as the season goes on, but Penn State secures the last second victory.